So welcome to our February session of Tunnel Talk. Today we're going to look at a few examples of on-farm adoption of IPM strategies. So I've chosen a few growers who have tried something sort of new to them through 2024 and kind of hope for them to talk about their experience and kind of set the stage, but also have that be a jumping off point for a discussion as well. If anyone else has anything they want to contribute, something they tried, whether you liked it or not, I didn't put the word success in there. Yeah, I think this is just a great sharing space for us to kind of get a better handle on IPM. All right, so a few upcoming events similar to our January meeting. There is a lot going on right now, so this is definitely not a comprehensive list by all means, but just a few things that I've sort of chosen. So for this particular webinar, March 13th, we're going to have a look at tunnel tweaks to improve tomato yield. So we have someone coming from New England, and he's going to talk about some survey work that he did and basically looked at tomato yield and how that compared to the adoption of certain practices over others. So I think that'll be a really cool way to just kind of look at some of the things we can do. We're hosting our Getting Into the Weeds virtual series, so that starts, I believe, next week. I tossed in the notes here what the topics are going to be. So February 12th, we're going to be looking at pest management. There is going to be a decent amount of that session focused on European corn borer. So for those of you who aren't familiar with ECB, or for those of you who haven't really heard about the current status of ECB, I would definitely recommend you checking it out. Obviously, this is a major corn pest, but there is proof that they like solanaceous crops like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. So nice to kind of just get a sense of when they're out and about and some of the things that we might be able to do to try to prevent them from getting in and burrowing out those tomato stalks. February 19th, the Getting Into the Weeds session is going to be looking at developing a weed management program. I'm guessing that that's going to be a bit more of a conventional approach as opposed to some of the more organic methods for weed management, but I'm not 100%. So it could be worth registering and jumping in on that session as well. And then I believe that there's two others. And I think those are up on the website if you want to check them out. I believe the department is hosting a Protecting Pollinators information session February 11th in Masstown. And then we have the Acorn Conference that's happening February 16 and 17 in Truro. Last but not least, I think we also have a Greenhouse Nova Scotia AGM meeting. I think that's coming after the Acorn Conference for those of you who want to jump in on that. And finally, we have a Soil Health Day. I believe that's being hosted by Horticulture Nova Scotia in collaboration with the On-Farm Climate Action Fund. That's happening March 3rd in the Annapolis Valley. So I think it's in and around Berwick, but I'm not totally sure on that. Okay, so that's all I really had. So I'm going to start picking on some of my friends here. David, can you give me a little hello?
Hi.
Oh my gosh. Okay, you came back and I can hear you. So we're good.
Yes.
We're in good shape. So why don't we start with you? And we do have one newfie on the call. So for those who are speaking, if you want to give just a super brief, like, this is what my name is, my farm, what we do, organic versus conventional, I think that would be awesome just to set the stage a little bit better. So, David.
Okay, so my name is David Blanchard. My wife Cindy and I run Pleasant Hill Farm in Pleasant River, which is in North Queens County. We're a certified organic vegetable farm. We have several greenhouses and we're in production year round. So what I want to talk about today is a couple of relatively new biocontrol organisms that we've used in our greenhouses for the past 2 years. One is called Anistis bacarum, familiarly known as the crazy mite. Crazy is because they never seem to stand still. They're always in motion. And the other is the brown lacewing. Both of these are generalist predators, so they prey on multiple different pests. And we'll start with the brown lacewing, who are active against aphids and against whiteflies. And one of the things that's really interesting about the brown lacewing is they can be active at very low temperatures, like down to 4 degrees Celsius. And uh, especially if you're doing year-round production in your greenhouses, aphids are sort of an ongoing problem. In the winter, they can survive the cold just fine. So our greenhouses aren't heated in the winter. We're just using multiple layers of row cover that we take on and off as the weather permits. So it does get quite cold in there. The aphids do just fine. They're not really reproducing very fast at that kind of temperatures, but they are feeding and they're there. And so as soon as the light and the temperature start to increase, typically around mid-February, if you've already got an aphid population, they will explode. The trouble is with the long-standing biocontrols like parasitoids, Aphidius colemanni, for instance, or predators, flying predators like Aphidoletes, they can't take the cold. They just are not active at all. Sometimes we've had them manage to overwinter, but they're not active on those aphids during the cold weather. So when we heard that the brown lacewings could be active down to 4 degrees, we got really interested and we ordered some up. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the month of January was very cold and very cloudy. And yet, when we were in our greenhouses harvesting greens, we'd pull the row covers back. And if there was even a little bit of sunshine, so the temperature was, up into the low single numbers inside the greenhouse, we could observe brown lacewings flying in there. So those had been released in the greenhouse in either late September or early October, and they were still surviving and they were still active. So we're quite enthusiastic about them. On the crazy mites, I haven't seen any data on how low a temperature they can survive at. But one thing that really interested us about them is, they will prey on any of the kinds of aphid species, whereas with the parasitoids, different aphid species require a different parasitoid. But the crazy mites are generalists, so you don't have to put your aphids under the microscope to determine the species so you know which parasitoid to use. If you've got aphids, you put some crazy mites in them, they will eat them. They also prey on thrips, which are another significant greenhouse pest for us, mostly on cucumbers. And they prey on spider mites, which, although they're a less frequent pest of ours, we do sometimes get trouble with them on the pole beans that we grow in the greenhouse and on our cucumbers. The crazy mites are available so that both of these are reared by Applied Bionomics out in BC, who don't sell directly to farmers. So you can go on their website and they list all of their dealers. They don't, at least the last time I looked, they didn't have a dealer right in Nova Scotia. We've been getting ours from Natural Insect Control in Stevensville, Ontario, and have been very satisfied with the service and the quality of the bugs that we're getting from them. One other thing I wanted to mention, and this is not based on my experience, this is just something that I recently read about and got kind of interested in. So we have a significant problem with wireworms as pests, both in the field, on all of our root crops, but also in the greenhouse. We don't grow many root crops in the greenhouse. We do grow some carrots, and wireworms can definitely be a problem with them. But we grow quite a lot of head lettuce in our greenhouses. And a few years ago, we started seeing this sudden wilt on transplants from head lettuce. Transplants that were still pretty small, so they'd been in the ground maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and very abruptly, we'd have one just collapse. And every time we pulled one of those up, there would be a wireworm attached to the taproot. So we know it's wireworms that's causing that. Anyway, I was reading about some research that's going on in Europe where they have recently lost the granular in-furrow pesticide that was their main tool against wireworms. And so Copert, which is one of the big multinational biocontrol suppliers, has been collaborating with some farmers and some agronomists to do field scale, so outdoor applications of nematodes, of parasitic nematodes against wireworms in potato crops and in carrot crops, and been having really good success. The nematode that they're using is called Steinernema carpocapsae, which is available for use here in Canada. You can buy them from Copert Canada. They're not very expensive. And the folks in England that were doing the potato trial were using 2 billion nematodes per hectare. And if you work that out, to do the math and work it out to the scale of a greenhouse bed, it's something like 25 million, which the cost of that is, I don't know, roughly $10. So like in a 30 by 96-foot greenhouse where the beds are, say, 90 feet long, 3 feet wide, 25 million would treat one bed at that 2 billion per hectare rate. And so it would cost you about $10 to treat the bed um, with the nematodes. So we're going to give that a try this year, and we'll report back in the future on what happens. So that's
Amazing.
yeah, that's basically what I had prepared to say. And if anybody's got questions, fire.
Fire away. So I will get us started and someone will interrupt me. Don't feel bad about doing that. So you said you guys released the brown lacewing around September. Was that because this was in and around the time you guys decided to give brown lacewing a try, or did you find it like not suitable for summer production?
Um, they are suitable for summer production, and we have used them in the summer as well. Something that I should have mentioned is our experience has been that we will get aphids in the wintertime. And
Mhm.
so until the brown lacewings came along, we knew that by November, the parasitoids that we usually use were going to be ineffective. So we have gotten in the habit of doing a preemptive strike in late September or early October when all of the it's still warm enough that all of the biocontrols are still active. So we actually did a multi-pronged release of crazy mites, brown lacewings, and Aphidius colemanni. We actually weren't really seeing any aphids at that time, but like I said, experience has shown that they're there and they will gradually build as the fall goes on. And if we wait, um, at least in the pre-brown lacewing days, there was not going to be anything really we could do until spring. So that's why the September
Absolutely.
release. But yeah, both the crazy mites and the brown lacewings do fine in the summer as well.
Yeah, I think where our options have been so limited in the winter, unfortunately, some of the best advice we could give was just don't forget about your insect pressure into the fall. You got to do
Yeah,
that preemptive release and not just think, well, my summer crops are done, so I don't have to worry about it. But you really have to stay on the ball if you're going to try to do
it, it
year
does, yeah.
round.
And I would add that for using biocontrol in general, it works way better either preventatively or very early in an outbreak. Um,
Hmm.
Biocontrols can actually control a really severe outbreak of, say, aphids, but it's going to be expensive and it's going
Hmm.
to take a few weeks to do it. So you can experience quite a lot of loss in the meantime. So, good scouting, good record keeping so that you know when your problem times of year are going to be so you can um, be proactive instead of reactive.
Can I ask how often you guys are doing, like from a preventative perspective, and we're not treating an outbreak, how often would you release your control agents?
So we do two preventive strikes per year, the one in September that I just talked about, and then we'll do another one in March because Again, experience has shown that there will always be some aphids that overwintered, and when the light and the warmth come back, their populations just explode. One
Mm.
of the interesting things about the biology of aphids is they have basically two phases of their life cycle. And in one phase, which is the phase when they're feeding heavily and their population's expanding, they do asexual reproduction. So everybody is female, and they are also basically giving birth to live aphids. So they're not going through that usual insect lifestyle of egg, larva, pupa, adult. They're born live and ready to start feeding. So that means their populations can explode. Just
Mhm.
really explode. Um, and while we're talking about biology, this is back a bit. An interesting thing about the crazy mites is they are all female. Nobody has ever observed a male crazy mite. So they're all reproductives, which
That's
just,
very interesting.
yeah, it's really interesting.
It's
But
wild.
that really helps out with their effectiveness because, their populations can build really fast.
Hmm. I'm gonna put it out to the, I should have a little panel here where I can see all your names, but I'm curious if anyone else has played around with brown lacewings and or crazy mite on the call. Can even put a little hand up. I think we can do that on here. I'll take your silence as meaning no.
Another point I'll make is um, they're not cheap. When you go to order them, especially if you're relatively new to using biocontrol, you might be in for a little bit of sticker shock. So, just for example, 100 adults cost $135. Plus, there's overnight shipping, which, like from Ontario to me, it's $40. Um, but something to bear in mind is that you're basically hiring a mini labor force when you buy biocontrols because it takes you 5 minutes or less to do the release in the greenhouse, and then your part is done. They go to work, they find the pests, they either eat or parasitize the pest depending on the biology of the particular species. Uh, but if you compare that to the labor of, say, spraying with a backpack sprayer inside a greenhouse, uh, it's it's a consideration. Also, there is no REI, and there is no pre-harvest interval with any of the biocontrols that we've ever used. So
No, I
another
appreciate you
consideration.
mentioning that, that it's a quick and easy to put it out once it shows up.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right. And you said, who are you buying those from?
we're buying them from Natural Insect Control. There are other dealers. We had done business with Natural Insect Control in the past, so when we saw they were uh, a dealer for what we wanted to buy, we just sort of went with them. So I haven't tried the other dealers, but like I said, the Applied Bionomics website lists all of their dealers in Canada. So you can
Okay.
use whoever seems good.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any other questions for David? And we can circle back as well. All right. We're circling. Thanks so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, I'm going to call on Brian.
Oh, hello. I'm going to talk about my tomatoes. Hey, my years long struggle with gray mold, botrytis in my tomato crop. I originally started growing tomatoes. Originally started growing them in a cold frame out here in Newfoundland, just a regular, and there was never enough heat units to get a ripe tomato here by the end of summer. So I moved them into here the Murrays. I grow annuals and perennials herbs for the garden center. So we've got about a dozen greenhouses on the go. One of them came up empty a few years ago. So I moved my tomato production to there. I built soil boxes and was trying to grow tomatoes in that organically. Um, and to pay for all the heat that I was using to get the crop, I needed a lot of tomatoes, and I just really wasn't cutting it in there. Like, I'm trying to control fertilization and with our limited sources of organic fertilizer here, just became kind of impossible. But we struggled along, and we had gray mold as we would. Just it was kind of moist in there with the amount of soil I had and our humidity here, but it was never really a big issue. But it started to become a big issue in the boxes, and then the boxes were rotting, and then I had carpenters or like pill bugs eating away the wood of the boxes, so it just became a giant mess. So I cleared them out, and you helped me get my hydroponic tomato system set up, which has been working really well. It's been excellent, actually, but the gray mold problem didn't go away, and it only got worse. And so I tried I don't know, I tried compost teas and different things to spray it that I had read, trying to keep things under control. And then I think it was you recommended it was double nickel. That's what it was. And that didn't do anything. Now, as an aside, I was telling you about this the other day, is just, I don't know, a few months ago, I found that bag of double nickel and noted that hadn't seen it before. The expiry date on it was years before I'd bought it, so that's why that didn't work. So then I just about lost the crop. Last summer, the summer before, it was almost gone. Like the gray mold had gone through everything. Every plant was covered in gray mold. And I was like, this is it. I'm going to lose them all. Just so happened, Carla from Halifax Seed was at the garden center. And I said to her, oh my God, I'm about to lose my tomatoes. She sent me some, oh shoot, what was it? No, it wasn't a biological. It was, is it Pristine? Is that,
Yep.
Yeah, so that took care of that problem, and I cleaned them up first, and then sprayed them with Pristine, which is like a regular conventional fungicide. But I didn't want to keep using that. So then after that, though, I also bought Root Shield HP, which I'd had a different root shield that I was using for root rot originally, like that I'd add to the coconut slabs in the hydroponic system to prevent the root rot. Then I got Root Shield HP last year and started doing preventative spraying with that, and I hardly had any gray mold problems. There was one other actually issue that I discovered too. That was last year. Was that last year? Yeah, it was early last year. All of our prunings from the tomatoes, and then the greenhouse next door that was growing annuals, all their prunings were just kind of going into a compost pile that was, I don't know, 70 feet away from our greenhouses and in the woods, and no one really was paying attention to it until one day I walked in there to dump some tomatoes, and there was this giant like monster of gray mold. Like the entire pile was covered in gray mold. All of that stuff was blowing into my greenhouse and had been for years. And I finally realized, oh my God, this is what the problem's been. So I cleared that out. And after that, the Root Shield HP, the gray mold problem almost went away almost overnight. So it was became a lot easier to manage. Still pops up once in a while, but I mean, it's really humid here, and I'm surrounded by, there's the woods are just, again, like 70 feet from the greenhouse. So there's going to be a lot of wild mold in the air anyway. It's not much I can do about it. But yeah, the root shield really helps. So definitely learn to clean things up around the greenhouse, and then using that HP as a preventative method. It's not going to stop it once it's in there. That just takes a lot of pruning, but yeah, it definitely made a big difference just using that. And then I, kind of keep the Pristine, and just in case things have gone bad, but I never had to use it again last year. So it was pretty good that way.
Yeah. So go ahead, Brian.
No, yes, sir. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I really appreciate like the story, because it's compost piles that are blowing in fungus, right? So it's not about having some, crazy robust plan, but just like sort of being aware of the layout of where everything is and where that wind goes. And
Yeah. Well, I
what
know.
you're trying to do downwind of it. So, I mean, it happens a lot. I think it happens to pretty commonly, but I think it's a great strategy for just trying to reduce that disease pressure.
Yeah. Just kind of pay attention to what's upwind and coming in on, especially on a susceptible crop to funguses.
Yeah.
Now, I'm kind of starting a whole new IPM sort of plan because I'm building that new greenhouse for hydroponic lettuce. And I'd played with hydroponic lettuce a little bit a couple of years ago, and the uh, what is it? The white fly? Is that the one that we were just talking about? Yeah, destroyed it pretty quickly. So I learned I'm definitely going to have to do something to protect that lettuce. So the plan for that greenhouse is I've got there'll be insect netting and all the intake and outtake vents, double doors, to get in to sort of prevent as many insects from getting in as well. And I'm not allowed to have crazy mites in Newfoundland. They're not allowed to be brought in. I guess they're afraid they'll eat everything before they. Um, but I do believe we can have brown lacewing. So I mean, if there's someone can help me answer this question, like if I create some sort of habitat inside that greenhouse that it's an otherwise sterile environment where the brown lacewings can live, like a hanging plant somewhere that, are going to catch stuff. And I mean, I imagine I might have to replace them every once in a while, but I mean, I was thinking, that's part of my plan is to have some sort of beneficial insect living in that greenhouse at all times in order to catch any like aphids or whiteflies or thrips. Thrips was actually, I think, was what got my lettuce last time.
Hmm.
So,
I think the idea of providing, habitat and maybe supplemental food in greenhouses is great. I've been looking, like in various scientific papers and stuff, and I have not been able to find anything yet about what would work for brown lacewings uh, as a supplemental food. One thing that's different between brown lacewings and green lacewings have been being used for decades in greenhouses for aphid control. But with the greens, only the larvae are predators. So it's the larvae that eat the aphids, and the adults are flower feeders. So that we know that certain kinds of flowers can help keep your adults going. Uh, but with brown lacewings, the adults are also predators. What I wonder about is, can they also like feed on pollen if there aren't any prey around? Because I know with some generalist predators, uh, supplemental pollen feeding uh, is a thing. But like I said, I just haven't been able to find any research suggesting that yes, that would help. So maybe we just need to try it and see if we can observe brown lacewings on the flowers. If they're hanging out on the flowers and they seem to be collecting pollen the way, say, bees do, that would be a pretty good indicator that pollen would help. But again, what kind of pollen, what kind of flower, I have no idea. Um,
yeah.
with the parasitoids that we also use in the summer for aphid control, like Aphidius colemanni, we found that sweet alyssum is really effective as a supplemental food for them. Because again, with the parasitoids, the larvae are the predators, the adults are flower feeders. And the parasitoids, the various Aphidius species, they're tiny, they're only, I don't know, 3 or 4 millimeters long. If you're not looking for them carefully in the greenhouse, you would never even know they were there. But we have observed them feeding on sweet alyssum. So one thing we do in our greenhouses is keep some sweet alyssum growing, either in pots or at the ends of beds, just as a supplement for our parasitoids. So yeah, it's we are planning to try with the brown lacewings this year to just offer them some different flowers, and probably they'll be in pots, and we'll just see if we observe them hanging out or not, and keep looking at research to see if anybody else who gets paid to do this for a living is actually working on it.
Mm-hmm.
So perfect segue there, David. Our speaker for the April Tunnel Talk is going to look at, I think it was like plant-mediated strategies for biocontrol agents.
Cool. Yeah.
Her name is Cheryl, and I don't know if she's New Hampshire, but she's like a New England entomologist.
Okay.
And I think she's done a good amount of work in that space. So I'm not sure whether she'll have the answer for brown lacewing, but I think that will be a great person for us to ask. And
Yeah, for
she
sure.
might have at least a starting point for what they may or may not like.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
that's great. The whole idea of, supplemental food for your biocontrols, which, as I said earlier, they're not cheap. So anything you can do to help them persist and reproduce, it's all to the good. And um, and those kind of plants are in the business, they're usually referred to as banker plants. So those
Mhm.
are a plant that you are growing just to feed your beneficials, and they may be providing pollen and nectar, or they may be providing a non-pest aphid species, which is something that we've got going in our greenhouses. There's an aphid species that only lives on grasses. It's called the bird cherry oat uh, aphid. And so unless you're growing like ornamental grasses in a nursery setting, uh, these aphids are not going to be a problem. So what they do is they're there for your parasitoids uh, to lay their eggs inside once they've cleaned up all of the pest aphids, and that lets them keep going.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
It's really, really
I'm
cool
really excited to
system.
hear that we're going to do a tunnel talk about banker plants because it's something that
Yes,
I'm
I was like,
really
this is
interested in.
awesome.
Yeah.
Try to keep those buggers alive as long as we can.
I was also thinking maybe like ladybugs, and I think because I know they're notorious for leaving, but if I've got them sealed inside my greenhouse, I think they're a little bit easier to keep fed.
They
Is that
are. We've definitely observed ladybugs feeding on sweet alyssum.
oh, okay? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't usually buy ladybugs, but we do seem to get um, on greenhouses that aren't screened. We do seem to get native ones moving into the greenhouse, and in fact, there's this uh, highly invasive ladybug which is slowly replacing all the native species in
Hmm.
it's the Asian ladybird beetle. Can't think of its scientific name right at the moment. Anyway, they in the fall they tend to congregate like on sunny, light-colored, south-facing surfaces. Um, and I've collected them off the outside of my white cargo van, off the siding on my sort of beige-colored house. And in the fall, if we see them congregating, we'll just sweep them into a plastic bag or a bucket or something and let them go in the greenhouse. Because although it's sad what they're doing to the native ladybug species, they are incredibly effective aphid predators, which is why they mistakenly got introduced into North
Hmm.
America in the first place.
Do you guys
Mm.
have a lot of lady beetles there, Brian?
Like wild ones?
Or any?
I mean, I've seen the odd one, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, we've introduced them inside greenhouses on occasion, but for aphid control. But yeah, I've not really seen a natural population around. I think we're just so windy and wet here up in the Avalon. Like there's not a lot of anything up here
Mm.
except aphids and thrips.
Can confirm, yes. And just to answer your question there, David, the active ingredient in double nickel is Bacillus. I'm gonna butcher it, but I always say amylofascians, but I think I've just taken the beginning and the end of that word and put it together. But it is a yeah, biological based product. And I've heard some good things about it. So I don't know if anyone's played around with it and seen it not expired and maybe it works wonders. But yes, check expiration dates on our products.
Yeah, I
Always a
mean, I
good
bought
thing.
mine from our pesticide dealer here, and trusted them for years. Didn't even think to look at the expiry date. And yeah, then I did years later, and it was like many years. I think it expired in like 2015 or something crazy. It was pretty old.
Yeah, it can be a bit dicey with those ones. And
Yeah.
so, however often you need to check that, put a reminder in your phone that this product isn't going to be as useful. You can still use it when it's expired, but you probably or might not get that same efficacy that they promise. So
Mhm.
awesome. All right. So I'm gonna then toss it to our last speaker, Ben. He's gonna talk about something a little bit different, but also pretty cool.
Hi, everyone. Uh, my name's Ben Vermeulen from Vermeulen Farms Limited. Uh, I own and operate our farm in Canning, Nova Scotia in the Annapolis Valley alongside my father, Andy. We basically grow fruits and vegetables, asparagus to zucchini sort of thing. And we sell to all the major retailers, Loblaws, Sobeys, Walmart in the maritime provinces. We produce about 6.4 hectares of ever-bearing strawberries under tunnels for fresh market. That's where we kind of have our greatest IPM challenges on the farm. Inherently, as you guys have alluded to, tunnels, like you're planting similar crops in the same area, there's little chance for crop rotation. In our case, we're planting strawberries year over year in the same production area. So integrated pest management isn't just using the same chemicals every single day. It's taking a variety of methods all together and trying to manage more an ecosystem within the tunnels or greenhouse. We use conventional fungicides and pesticides. If you're familiar with strawberries, they get quite significant disease pressure from the beginning of the year to the end. Pests some come springtime, some continue throughout the main season, but even enclosed in the tunnel, you're getting pests enter the production site. So where we had our biggest problem at the farm was with cyclamen mite or tarsamid mite. This originated from our nursery stock coming from California. It basically goes dormant, gets down in the crowns of the strawberry plant, and when unknowingly we get it in with our plant material we plant in our greenhouse. And then you typically around June, July, they've multiplied enough and they're basically need a 30 times lens to see these pests. And so you generally don't know they're in your crop until you see the damage caused, which flowers start to get deformed, fruit get cracked, and there's essentially only one chemical control that's effective against them. And that's in other countries that's been deregulated already. So we're kind of looking ahead, seeing the writing on the wall for that and explored other options. Namely with predatory mites was our first go-to. We kind of relied on, I would say, the most generic ones like Cucumaris, and a more specialized one for tarsamid mite was Californicus. We introduced those pretty well from springtime right through, do 3 applications a season. And then they really give, as I think David was saying, if you introduce them early on before you see the pest and they get established, it's by far the best use of biologicals. So we've had reasonably good success with beneficials, but they kind of control, but you still have a population in the tunnels and they're persistent in the field. They've carried over year in the site. So we were kind of looking for another solution, and we ended up traveling to the Netherlands looking for a solution. We came upon a company named Maleda in the Netherlands, and they produce plant sauna. So more or less, this technology is using a steam heat treatment on the plants to essentially disinfect them from pests and diseases. We invested in one of these machines and got it in here spring of 2024. Basically, you put a pallet of your strawberry plants into this chamber. It's sealed up. We have an electric boiler to generate the steam. It's controlled by 3 temperature probes that you insert into the box of plants, and it monitors the temperature as it's injecting steam into the chamber. Put it generally, I guess it does an initial 34-degree cycle, which causes the plants to produce heat shock proteins. This is basically what plants naturally would produce when it's high temperature to keep their proteins from denaturing. That cycle's completed. It's about an hour at 34 degrees. Then there's a cooling period of about an hour. You bring the temperature back down, and then it goes up to 44 degrees Celsius for a 2-hour treatment. And that's temperature is just low enough. It doesn't damage the plants, but it will kill pests and diseases. So we basically put all of our plants through as we were planting the field in spring and treated them. It's kind of a 24-hour affair, loading plants and treating them. It ends up being probably about a 4 or 5 hour cycle to complete a treatment and then rotate things. And then, yeah, we plant it. Plants all survived. It was all, that part was good. And probably by about June, July, once the plants were up and growing and flowers were out, we pretty well knew we didn't run into any problems. And you could see the effects of the treatment at that point. Like pests we would typically would have had, like weevils and aphids, two-spotted spider mite, and the tarsamid mite were kind of the main ones that we noticed were controlled. We had lower instance of powdery mildew and botrytis initially. We probably didn't run into any major disease pressures till August, September, when they naturally move into the tunnels. But, yeah, we're very pleased with the results, and throughout the whole season, we had full control of our cyclamen mite issue for the first time in 5 years. It being, yeah, completely like an electric boiler. If anybody else is putting up solar panels through the Clean Tech program here, just released by the province, it's completely, yeah, we have our own energy to use the equipment and not relying on like an oil boiler to run it. Yeah. The company markets it essentially for soft fruit industry, like raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, strawberries. That's just initially what they've tested it on, but they're looking at what other, I guess, crops they could apply it to. In addition to treating plant material, we've used it to sterilize our propagation trays for the greenhouse. So end of the season, we packed up our plants, put all the trays into there, and you can steam sterilize propagation trays and whatnot for springtime as well. So see, what carries over for weed control and disease control that way. So
So Ben, you commented that your pest pressure was much lower. So did that mean you guys were in there a lot less in terms of like beneficials and sprays? Like, did you kind of see the labor
yeah,
impacted by using the sauna?
um, yeah, I would say uh, we still ran our same beneficial program. I think
Okay.
we ended up uh, late end season is probably still an issue. Like
Mhm.
initially in the springtime, we saw a drastic reduction in pest and disease pressure. By we're into August, September, pest pressure starts to creep up again, disease pressure. Uh,
Mhm.
September's typically the highest disease pressure for powdery mildew for us. And as you get into fall, when it gets cool overnight and we get a lot of condensation, the humidity in the tunnels condensate, you run into a lot of botrytis, different diseases come prevalent then. But uh, we still continued with our beneficial program. We kind of hedged our bets on it working or not this year, so we still
Right, absolutely.
continued as we were, sort of thing. But
hmm
uh, yeah, it's not the silver bullet, but it definitely paid for itself.
That's
So
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah. And did you find a difference in plant performance? You kind of mentioned, flowers were out when you wanted and nothing died, but
yeah, no, that's like you initially defrost the plants out of the cold storage, do the heat treatment. The plants immediately are basically awake and transpiring, like have guttation the next morning. Uh, if we plant it just out regularly, typically it take a week or two before the plants really get established. So it's kind
Hmm,
of kickstarts the plants. They're warmed up and ready to go.
ready to go.
So
Interesting. That's pretty cool. We have a question here. Did you have to change your spray program after introducing beneficials?
yes, conventionally, like we had quite a few chemicals available. When we introduced beneficials into our production, the focus is not killing your great big investment in beneficials the first time you spray. And uh, so it drastically reduced the options we had for chemical control, uh, using a more well-rounded, like introducing more than one species of beneficial is probably where we could go as well. But
Hmm.
uh, trying to balance having thrips, aphids, and mites and not killing your beneficials while trying to target another pest is always very challenging. But where
Yep.
you would have had 6 options, it's down to 1 or 2. So
Yep. Were there any tools that you found helpful to like either picking softer chemistries or maybe changing the frequency of sprays?
yeah, we kind of inherently you get on kind of the cycle of the pest. Like if
Hmm.
you're basically every 2 weeks they reach a threshold where you have to control them or vice versa. Um, where we only have a few options, it's kind of trying to rotate through the options we have and then not overuse them. So
Yep.
yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking about it. I think it's pretty cool to see the impact that a, clean, healthy starting material can have when you aren't sort of already having a losing battle.
Yeah, I agree.
Was the steamer that you're using, did you bought that from the Netherlands? Like, are they available to
Yep.
easy to get?
Yep, they have, I think we got our unit, they have them pre-assembled, so it was arrange a container was the biggest deal to get it in for springtime on time. But yeah, we had it within 2 months, and they flew technician over. The biggest challenge with the electric boiler was
Mm.
European power to North American. So they have a different frequency. So their technician had to come up with the right transformers for that. But uh yeah, uh Maleta is the name of the company. You can search that online, or I can get that for Talia maybe if you're
Oh, there we
interested in
go.
checking out. There you go.
Kendra's on the ball.
uh yeah, they're excellent to deal with. So
Well, and I'm curious to see what kind of happens down the line with that. It sounds like they were focused on berries, but you know, there's a lot more we can use that for.
yeah, uh they've talked about different nursery or ornamental crops and
Big
other things
time.
like that. So
That'd be
yeah,
awesome. All right, we got a question from Josh.
Hey Ben, nice to see you.
yeah, you too.
When you're releasing beneficials out into the field, do you find that the recommendations are like for how much to release per area is accurate, or do you kind of bump that up a little bit, or what's your experience with that?
Uh, we've ended up using sachets mostly. We've used some bulk material, just they sprinkle over the leaf canopy, but the sachets are far easier for the guys to deal with and get a consistent application. Like you just say hang one every 2 bags in the field, or instead of trying to guess how much to sprinkle and they run out of a bottle early or whatnot. Uh, but one of the main things we ran into using the sachets, if they're in a paper sachet, they were drying out when we got hot summer days with sun. They'd dry out the bags, and then the mites uh, basically didn't perform well. Uh, the there's I think it's aluminum foil sachet. It maintains the humidity within the sachet, and that helps them, I guess, breed and survive the low humidity environment in the tunnel through that period. That was probably one of the biggest things we ran into. Uh, and then, yeah, using the bulk material was it was probably easily twice the time for us to sprinkle stuff around compared to the sachets. So on the labor side of things, it kind of evens out the little bit extra price sort of thing. But
All right, do we have any final questions for our speakers today or for the group? All righty, I think that's it. Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about what you've been doing on farm and how you like it or how you don't like it. Luckily, there weren't too many of those today, but I'm sure as this goes on, we'll start to dig into that a little bit more. Yeah, so next session will be March. I should know the date, but I'm forgetting it right now. So hopefully we will see you for that session looking at tunnel production. If we want to keep going on the IPM train, then we're going to have an April session with an entomologist talking about like banker plants and that sort of thing. So thanks for coming. Thanks so much for speaking and have a good day, everybody.